All right, you fuckers, buckle up. Today we're going deep into some real nerd shit, the history of video games. Think you know games. Get ready to have your minds blown wide fucking open.
We're going to rip through decades of consoles, controllers, and code, all the way from those blocky-ass beginnings to the mind-blowing shit we got today.
We're going way back. Before Atari, before Pong, back when computers were the size of a fucking house and probably smelled like old people.
Think like the late 1940s and 50s. Those computers. Giant, expensive machines, mainly for research and military stuff. But some crazy-ass scientists started using them for fun, too, creating the first, prototypes of video games.
Oh, picture this playing tic-tac-toe against a machine the size of a goddamn refrigerator. That shit was real, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
One example is Birdie the Brain, built back in 1950. Used light bulbs for display, could play tic-tac-toe against humans. Basically a big publicity stunt showing off how cool computers were.
So those guys were the OG gamers, paving the way for all us joystick junkies. But let's be real, those early games were pretty basic.
Primitive by today's standards, for sure. But they laid the foundation for everything that came after. One of the most important early games was Space War, created in 1962 on a PDP-1 mainframe computer at MIT. A two-player space battle game, kind of like a prehistoric version of Asteroids.
And get this, they were sharing the game's code across the country. Back then, going viral meant mailing floppy disks through the goddamn postal service.
The birth of the gaming community, even if it was a tiny exclusive club back then.
So I got these brainiacs tinkering away, creating the first sparks of what would become a global phenomenon. But when did gaming really explode into the mainstream?
The 1970s, that's when arcades popped up, those dark, smoky dens of pixelated glory. The first commercial arcade game was Computer Space in 1971. But the real game changer, Pong, released in 1972. Simple, addictive, and it took the world by storm.
Pong, 2 lines and a dot. Seriously, how the fuck did that become a global phenomenon?
It was easy to pick up and play and had that competitive element that hooked people. Pong was everywhere, arcades, bars, even some people's homes. It proved that video games could be a legitimate business and a source of endless entertainment.
So Pong was like the big bang of the gaming universe.
Yeah, you could say that.
Huh.
But then came the inevitable crash. Everyone and their grandma started making dedicated home consoles, most of which were just shitty Pong clones. By 1977, the market was flooded with these consoles, and the bubble burst.
Classic case of oversaturation. Too much crap, not enough quality.
Yeah.
But hey, that's the gaming industry for you. Always a roller coaster ride of booms and busts.
Exactly. But let's not forget about the golden age of arcades. The late 70s and early 80s were a magical time for gamers.
Ah, the good old days. Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, those games were fucking legendary.
Arcades were making bank, and these iconic games cemented their place in pop culture history. It's also when we saw the birth of Activision. A group of pissed-off programmers at Atari, tired of getting no credit for their work, walked out and started their own company.
Talk about sticking it to the man. Those guys were pioneers, the first third-party game developers. They basically paved the way for the diverse and competitive gaming landscape we have today.
Absolutely. But even with all this innovation, the industry couldn't escape another crash. The video game crash of '83 was brutal.
Too much hype, too many shitty games, not enough quality control. Sound familiar?
History often repeats itself, especially in the fickle world of tech. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Out of the ashes of this crash, a new power emerged. Japan.
Enter Nintendo, the goddamn emperors of the 8-bit era. They brought the NES to the US in 1985, learned from the mistakes of their predecessors, and resurrected the gaming industry.
They had strict publishing controls, iconic franchises like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, and a knack for creating games that were both fun and innovative.
Those are the days of blowing on cartridges, agonizing over pixelated deaths, and feeling like a god when you finally beat that impossible boss.
Nintendo's dominance was challenged in 1989 when Sega released the Genesis, a 16-bit console that boasted superior graphics and processing power.
And thus began the epic 16-bit console wars, a battle for supremacy that pushed both companies to innovate and deliver even better gaming experiences. We're talking blast, processing sonic speed, and a whole lot of trash talk.
This era was all about pushing the boundaries of what consoles could do. Games became more complex storylines, more intricate, and graphics. Well, they were still pretty blocky, but they were getting better.
But the 90s were just around the corner, and shit was about to get real. CD-ROMs, 3D graphics, and a new contender for the console crown, Sony.
That's where things start to get really interesting. All right, so the 90s. Wild time for gaming, right? Technology was advancing like a motherfucker, and the industry was going through some serious growing pains.
Yeah, those tiny cartridges finally went extinct. CD-ROMs came in and blew everyone's fucking minds. Bigger games, better graphics, and those cinematic cutscenes made you feel like you were in a goddamn movie.
It was a huge leap forward. Games could hold so much more information. Developers could create more expansive worlds, more detailed characters, more immersive experiences.
Remember those cheesy full-motion video games? Like that one with the cowboys, Mad Dog McCree? So bad, it's good.
They don't knock it. It was experimental, pushing the boundaries of what was possible at the time. But you're right, the real impact of CD-ROMs was on games like Final Fantasy VII. That game showed what console RPGs could really be.
Final Fantasy VII was a fucking masterpiece. The story, the characters, the world building, it was all on another level, and those pre-rendered cutscenes. Mind-blowing for the time.
A landmark title, no doubt. But the 90s weren't just about bigger games. They were about a whole new dimension. 3D.
Yeah, we went from those blocky sprites to worlds that actually had some depth. Remember playing Wolfenstein 3D for the first time? Shooting Nazis in the face in glorious first-person 3D?
Wolfenstein 3D was a revolution. Popularized the first-person shooter genre, showed the world the power of 3D graphics. And then came Doom in 1993. Took everything to the next level.
Doom was brutal, fast-paced, and had graphics that melted our goddamn minds. It was so influential that for years, every FPS was called a Doom clone.
And it wasn't just shooters. The 90s saw those real-time strategy games like Command & Conquer and Warcraft. Adventure games like Myst and The Seventh Guest were pushing the boundaries of storytelling and puzzle design. And simulation games like SimCity and The Sims were letting us create our own little worlds.
The 90s were a golden age for PC gaming, no doubt. But consoles weren't slacking either. Sony came out of nowhere with the PlayStation basically dethroned Nintendo.
The PS1 embraced CD-ROM technology and 3D graphics, and it had a killer lineup of games. Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider. These were groundbreaking titles that pushed the boundaries of what was possible on a console.
Sony really understood what gamers wanted. They gave us mature, complex games with stunning visuals. And the PlayStation's marketing was brilliant. They tapped into that rebellious, edgy vibe that resonated with a whole new generation of gamers.
Nintendo wasn't down for the count, though. They stuck with cartridges for the Nintendo 64, which was a risky move, but they still delivered some amazing games. GoldenEye 007 revolutionized console shooters, and Ocarina of Time is still considered one of the greatest games of all time.
The N64 had that innovative controller with the analog stick, which was a game changer for 3D movement. And those 4 controller ports, perfect for epic multiplayer battles.
And let's not forget about handheld gaming. The Game Boy was a goddamn phenomenon. Simple, affordable, and had an incredible library of games. Everyone had one.
I remember playing Tetris on my Game Boy until my thumbs were numb. And then came Pokemon. That shit took over the world.
Pokemon was a cultural phenomenon. It spawned a massive franchise with anime trading cards and countless sequels. It proved that you didn't need fancy graphics to create a truly captivating game.
But the 90s were coming to an end, and the internet was about to change everything. Gaming was on the verge of a truly massive shift.
We were about to enter the world of online gaming, where millions of players could connect and compete in virtual worlds.
All right, motherfuckers, we're back and ready to rip through the 2000s. The era that brought us online gaming, those ridiculous plastic guitar controllers, and a whole new level of gaming addiction.
The 2000s were a time of massive change for the industry. The internet became a central force. Consoles got even more powerful, and a new generation of developers rose up to challenge those established giants.
Yeah, the internet basically blew the fucking doors off gaming. We went from those clunky dial-up connections to broadband speeds. Suddenly we could play against anyone in the world. It was a whole new ballgame.
The consoles of this era were beasts. Sony continued their domination with the PlayStation 2, the best-selling console of all time. It had a DVD player, a massive library of games and graphics that were pretty damn impressive for the time.
The PS2 was a fucking tank. I spent countless hours on that thing, playing Grand Theft Auto III, Metal Gear Solid 2, Shadow of the Colossus. The list goes on and on. It was a golden age for console gaming.
Microsoft entered the fray with the original Xbox, a powerful machine with a focus on online gaming thanks to Xbox Live. They also introduced the world to Halo, a groundbreaking first-person shooter that became a cultural phenomenon.
Halo was a game changer. The multiplayer was insanely addictive, and it really showcased what online console gaming could be. We're talking epic battles, trash talk, and those late-night sessions that turned into all-nighters.
Nintendo, always the wild card, took a different approach with the Wii. They focused on motion controls and accessibility, bringing gaming to a whole new audience.
Yeah, my grandma was out there bowling and playing tennis on the Wii. It was a brilliant move by Nintendo. They tapped into a market that everyone else was ignoring.
The DS also continued Nintendo's success in the handheld market. Its dual screens and touch controls were innovative and opened up new possibilities for game design.
I remember being blown away by the DS's touchscreen. It felt like the future of gaming. And those brain age games. I thought I was going to become a fucking genius playing those. Turns out they just made me slightly better at Sudoku.
But the real revolution of the 2000s was the rise of online gaming. MMOs like World of Warcraft exploded in popularity, creating these massive virtual worlds where millions of players could connect and play together.
World of Warcraft was a goddamn phenomenon. It sucked people in and never let them go. I lost a few years of my life to that game. Raiding dungeons, grinding for loot, and arguing with 12-year-olds in chat rooms.
It was a game that changed the way we think about online gaming. It created a sense of community and belonging that was unlike anything we'd seen before.
And let's not forget about those plastic guitar controllers. Guitar Hero and Rock Band were everywhere. Everyone was suddenly a rock star shredding on their plastic axes and pretending to be in a band.
It was a fad, sure, but it was a fun one. Those games brought people together, got them moving, and introduced them to some classic rock anthems.
I spent way too much money on those plastic instruments. But hey, I still rock out to Free Bird on my plastic guitar every now and then. No shame in that.
The late 2000s also saw the rise of smartphones and app stores, which brought mobile gaming to the masses. Games like Angry Birds Candy Crush and Fruit Ninja became global phenomenons.
Yeah, suddenly everyone was swiping and tapping on their phones, trying to beat their high scores and unlock new levels. Mobile gaming became a massive industry, and it changed the way we play games.
And let's not forget about the indie revolution. Independent developers armed with passion and creativity started delivering some of the most innovative and exciting games of the decade.
The indies brought fresh ideas and unique gameplay experiences to a market that was becoming increasingly dominated by big-budget sequels and reboots. Games like Braid Super Meat Boy Fez and Minecraft showed that you didn't need a huge team or a massive marketing budget to create a masterpiece.
As we moved into the 2010s and beyond, graphics became even more realistic, online gaming became even more integral to the experience, and new technologies like virtual reality started to emerge.
VR is a trip. It's like being transported into another world. It's still early, but the potential is insane.
The future of gaming is constantly evolving. We're seeing new genres emerge, new platforms arise, and new ways to connect with other players.
It's a wild ride, man. From those clunky machines and pixelated blobs to the immersive, hyper-realistic worlds we have today, gaming has come a long way, and it's only getting more insane.
So there you have it, folks. A whirlwind tour through the history of video games. It's a story of innovation, creativity, and a whole lot of passion.
And a shit ton of wasted hours, sleepless nights, and controllers thrown at the wall.
But that's all part of the fun, right?
Damn right. So grab your controllers, boot up your PCs, and get ready for the next level. The future of gaming is in your hands.
Until next time, game on, you magnificent bastards.